You're listening to New England Real Estate Journal Radio with Rick Kaplan, New England's source for commercial real estate news. This is New England Real Estate Journal Radio on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com.
Welcome to the New England Real Estate Journal Radio Show. I'm Rick Kaplan with my co-host Eric Wilson. And today in the studio we have David Kirk of Kirk Company and Brett Pelletier. What's your position, Brett?
Senior analyst.
Yeah, senior analyst from the Kirk Company as well. And the show today is brought to you by the New England Real Estate Journal, bringing together the commercial real estate industry for over 50 years. Find us at NEREJradio.com. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor for the show, call 800-654-4993 or email us at radio@nerej.com. Again, that's 800-654-4993 or email radio@nerej.com. And we were kind of busy last week, Eric.
We were. I did a double event on Thursday.
A double?
Yeah.
What were the two
Which
events?
is usually, you know me, I tend to event out at each event I go to, so doubling up was a mighty task. We went to the Canon Design 30th anniversary. That was awesome. They had, 4 stations. I know, of course, we go right to the food and drinks.
Yeah, we don't even know what they do, but the food was good.
No.
That's all that matters.
Well, they're architects and engineers. We know that. We met a bunch of great people from the company. Lynn walked us around initially when we first got there. Plus, they gave away the $10,000 check for Youth of Boston, which was really cool. That was a really good thing.
And that was a big check.
That was. They did the they did like the
it was probably about
Price is Right type check.
It was about 10 feet long.
Yeah, it was. It was really cool. So we had to enjoy that. That was a really good time. And then we went to the
non-gala.
Yeah, the non-gala from Building Impact. We had to check that out. That was really cool. Shout out to Justin. He did a great job putting that together. And what we did when we first got there, we walked through stations and put together like care packages. And I was part of a blanket. So I'll forever be remembered as the guy who put together the corner of the blanket, the gray and white one. So that was really cool. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And, that was Solomon, I believe it was, it was at One Post Office Square. It was a really good time.
Yeah.
So you should go there next year with me, Rick, and check it out.
I would. We can only go to so many of these.
It's tough. Yeah, especially when you and I are the two that usually try to go to all the events.
Yeah, we try to look for the ones that have the open bar.
That's usually a bonus. That goes to the top of the email list.
That's right.
No. Yeah, those.
And then the ones that have the shrimp and sushi stations, those also fit in.
And the slider stations and the Asian fusion. That was, both of them actually were open bar last week. That's why I was saying it was really difficult for me, the normal double event. But
you're still trying to recover from it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. You get to see a lot of the people that we work with at the Journal. So there was a lot of supporters, National Development, Suffolk, those kind of players. It was cool.
And one thing I got to say about Canon Design, they had this event. It was in their office,
right?
And you have never seen such clean desks. They had these big stations all over the place, and they were all spotless.
Probably because there was a party about to go on.
Either that or no one does any work there.
I would probably say it's a party.
Digital.
Everything's digital. Everything's on the computer.
Yeah, but you saw, enough for architects and engineers. They still like to get their hands dirty, when they're drawing and they're painting. We saw on both sides, like one side with the
engineers and the
engineers
others,
was like completely clean. Everything was folded, neat and center. And then you went to the other side and it was, artists and math people. There's two different sides, right and left side of the brain. That's how their office was. It was really cool. The atmosphere must be a lot of fun during the day.
Yeah, I usually only have one half of my brain that works normally.
Yeah, the back half.
Yeah, it's all central.
never the frontal lobe stuff.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with David Kirk of Kirk Company and Brett Pelletier. He might throw in a few words, right, Brett?
Sure. He's in a peanut gallery back there.
Yeah. And the show today is brought to you by the New England Real Estate Journal, bringing together the commercial real estate industry for over 50 years. Find us at NEREJ.com. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor for the show, call 800-654-4993 or email us at radio@nerej.com. Again, that's 800-654-4993. 4993 or email radio@nerej.com. And we'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
The next level in commercial real estate. This is New England Real Estate Radio on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com.
And we're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio. I'm Rick Kaplan with my co-host Eric Wilson. And our interview today is brought to you by Command Security Corporation. It's the nation's most trusted and experienced provider of affordable contract security services. Command Security Corporation offices nationwide and operations at numerous major international airports. They provide complete, customized, and cost-effective security solutions for industries, businesses, institutions, and organizations of all sizes. To find out more how Command Security Corporation can solve your security needs, contact John Dunleavy at 800-791-9102 or go to commandsecurity.com. That's John Dunleavy at 800-791-9102 or go to commandsecurity.com. And we have in the studio with us is David Kirk of Kirk Company and Brett Pelletier. And good morning.
Good morning.
Men. Well, you want to tell us a little bit about what Kirk and Company is all about?
Kirk Company is a commercial real estate valuation and counseling company. We provide a variety of appraisal services and real estate counseling services to a clientele that includes commercial developers, lenders, institutional users of property such as hospitals, healthcare facilities, churches, religious organizations, and governments, public entities, quasi-government entities, and towns and communities, federal government. Most of the work has some aspect of valuation of real property involved. Sometimes it's just an appraisal. Sometimes it's an appraisal and a litigation matter. A lot of what we do on the counseling side has to do with feasibility and marketability of new properties, either adaptive reuse or repositioning or brand new developments.
So what is your title of this? What would you consider this as? Are you an attorney? Are you an appraiser?
Well, the word counselor sometimes does bring up the word attorney. No, as counseling, real estate counseling is a practice unto itself. It's providing advice on a non-contingent basis. This world is full of brokerage and contingent fees, whether it's in mortgage or sales of properties or leasing. And counselors tend to structure their fees on a non-contingent basis, whether it's good news or bad news. And we're not always done with a study. Often we have a continuing counseling role with the client to help them implement our recommendations or our findings or help them find another professional. But you mentioned legal. Real estate has a very big chunk of the legal world embedded in it, from title to leases to the impact of legislation, zoning,
yeah,
all of these. And so we have to not be intimidated by legal documents because it's such an integral part of everything that we do. And I do appear in court as an expert. Sometimes my conclusions are part of a dispute resolution, and the parties aren't able to agree, and so they appeal to a judicial body to make that determination. And I will appear as an expert supporting my.
So you're the guy that knows a lot of the things that the average person or the average landowner or property owner doesn't know. You're sort of walking them through a lot of the steps.
Well, I certainly for someone who might be processing the estate of a relative who's not a lawyer, might inherit a portfolio of properties. And I am an expert. I can defend my conclusions in court or before a panel. And I do perform diligence. This is not something I do from an ivory tower. It's something that I do through research, both primary and secondary research. And I analyze that research and then reach a conclusion. And so in that process, even with my most sophisticated clients, I occasionally turn up some things that they may not have realized before.
And how long has Kirk Company been around? When did you first become a counselor?
Well, I first became a counselor in the 80s, but I've had Kirk Company since 93. So we're celebrating our 20th year and getting ready to go for our third decade.
Fantastic.
So something's working.
So it happened during the...
it is. Sustainable.
Right, exactly.
Endurable.
So this took place during the with the Reagan boom? That's when you got into...
No, I started... Actually, you're really nice to put me in those. I graduated...
He's not usually nice.
He isn't. I graduated from Wharton in 1967.
Down in Pennsylvania.
Down in Pennsylvania. And I worked in New York for 3 years before I came to Boston. So I have been in the business for, what does that make it, 40 years? A little more than 40 years.
That's all right. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it takes,
It takes a while to get it down.
Takes a while to get it right.
Now that makes you an expert.
Yeah, right.
40 years, you've got to be an expert.
So when you... do you play on both sides? So if you worked, like you were saying, sometimes your stuff gets into disputes. Do you work with banks as well as sometimes individual private
I do.
owners?
As a matter of fact, I was flattered during one of the recessions. I had both. I had as clients both creditors and debtors, but I had two cases where the creditor and debtor came together and named me as a mediating appraiser, as opposed to each naming an appraiser to be resolved otherwise. So, yes, I do work on both sides, and I also mentioned that I work for banks and lenders, and I also work for developers.
Right.
And while I'm careful to acknowledge any kind of conflict that might occur in any assignment, it's those conflicts that make me a better expert for both sides.
Right.
So that's... So when you say you're also a expert witness for, is that when like an appraisal goes wrong or something happens to the property that was unforeseen? What
type of situation would you be called in?
Well, bankruptcy is the standard
one.
But I've mentioned also estate. Tax determination, gift tax determination. Not all of my work is prepared for litigation that is already scheduled. Occasionally, the dispute will occur after I have performed whatever I have to do. But I am hired as an expert in anticipation of testifying or being deposed on the matter. And it's not always trouble. I suppose taxes are always trouble, but there's certain matters.
Since there was kings and queens.
Real estate taxes is another. It's a appellate tax board I appear before and questions of valuation.
So do you deal more so in the appraisal side of things than most of
Well, I did mention that even when I'm a counselor or when I'm appearing in court, the matter that I'm dealing with often has to do with a question of value. But I would say probably around 50% is appraisal, and another 50% doesn't clearly fit into the appraisal category, but it's some sort of kind of counseling. Marketability. We do a lot of market studies for new developments, taking a pulse on the macro level of the economy, but then doing the real down and gritty, we call it meet the market, beat the market, and more recently spark the market, which is taking a very hard look at what the competition is going to be when for a new project.
Yeah, so how many of now with the economy changes so frequently in this country, how does the appraisal process, how do you work that as far as between commercial and residential?
I don't do any residential.
Okay, so it's only commercial.
It's commercial, but in that category is multifamily and sometimes subdivisions.
So as the economy changes, obviously the appraisals will change as well, and you have to go in. What do you look at? You look at the locations, the type of properties.
Well, there is a major checklist, but if you just want three answers, the first thing is indeed to look at the property, and I've looked at a lot of property. And one of the things that I certainly am looking at is any apparent weakness in the asset itself. But that also goes down to topography and what the drainage is like and what the neighbors are like. The second category, and this is an iterative process, might be the market itself and what the competitive environment of the property is. And thirdly, the overall current economy and what its impact might have on all three of those things.
Now, what would you consider right now in the Boston area a hot area for
a hot market?
Well, a hot area of the state of Massachusetts.
Well, I think the Boston metropolitan area is in the top three categories of all institutional investment articles or measurements. And the reason it is because it is a market that is enjoying good economic conditions, and its prospects are good. And the next to that is this is a market where it's hard to get approved entitlements, so there's restraint on supply. So I'd say the Boston metropolitan market, but it isn't a market that is universally sound. I tend not to pick the areas where there's softness, but there are areas in the Boston metropolitan area that have not been lifted by the tide. And it might very well be that the fact that they're old or poorly located or not suitable for current use. I mean, we're having a revolution in retail. Between the web and the changing of the way marketing is, some retail properties are scrapes. Scrapes are things that are going to be torn down and replaced with something else. And certainly the western part of our state is not enjoying the economic support that we're getting here. But compared to the rest of the country, the western part of the state might look pretty good to some people.
Yeah, well, you're the expert.
Yes, you tell us.
Yeah. I'm trying to get that information so I can stop.
Oh, I'm not going to give you a buy order yet.
Well, we're going to go to another break, but when we come back, one of the things and it's happening down in New Jersey right now, is the climate change. And I
think it's happening all over the world, not just New Jersey.
No, but with the climate change, they're setting all kinds of new regulations for how they're going to construct new properties
for futurists.
Yeah. So when we come back, I'd like to get into that a little more, because that's also in Boston. They are also concerned about that.
Nice.
Our interview today is brought to you by Command Security Corporation, is the nation's most trusted and experienced provider of affordable contract security services. Command Security Corporation offices nationwide and operations at numerous major international airports. They provide complete, customized, and cost-effective security solutions for industries, businesses, institutions, and organizations of all sizes. To find out more how Command Security Corporation can solve your security needs, contact John Dunleavy at 800-791-9102 or go to commandsecurity.com. That's John Dunleavy at 800 791-9102, or go to commandsecurity.com, and we'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
Rick Kaplan and Eric Wilson, right here on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com.
And we're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio. I'm Rick Kaplan with my co-host Eric Wilson, and we have in the studio today David Kirk of Kirk Company and Brett Pelletier. And we might get Brett to say a couple of words on the mic. If you have anything, just step up, Brett. Well, when we went to the break, I can't talk now, but we were going to talk a little bit about the climate change and how that's affecting everything along the coast, especially. Like what I was saying while we were on the break, I was saying about the New Jersey coast, and when they had that Sandy, what was it, the storm?
Hurricane Sandy.
Hurricane Sandy, and Boston's also kind of concerned about all of that.
Yeah, I don't know whether you put this actually in the climate change category, but there is no question that this winter, 2013-14, will go down in the books. We have had extreme weather from the West Coast to the East Coast, down to the southern extremities of our country. A lot of it blamed on the polar vortex, but they've come up with some other phenoms that I haven't really been familiar with before. And weather like this has a lot of impact on commercial real estate. The big thing around here in New England that I started to get a sense of was these blackouts. The extended period and scope with thousands of users without electricity or power for periods of 2 and 3 weeks. I don't know. I could ask you guys, how many of your friends went out and bought generators or were thinking about it?
Yeah, no, I know. But
we don't think about doing any of that stuff, especially city living.
Yeah, but maybe that's where the solar starts coming in. We've had solar people on our show where now you could have that whole system put in your facility, and now you're generating your own power, so you're not as concerned about it.
Solar is very expensive, particularly without tax credits, but you don't do it without tax credits. But I certainly wouldn't rule it out. There are other strategies that are probably more cost-effective for the average Joe in terms of having an efficient energy system to start with, but also having alternatives. I use the word nimble, which means that you have to be ready to change. You have to be ready to hustle. One of the big things that was said over and over again here in the Northeast was having people ready to work from home effectively and efficiently and comfortably was really a boon. It was a benefit during our period where we had 1 or 2 days that really closed shop. I thought the governor's idea to close so that we could clear the roads was kind of a cockeyed way a coward's way of attacking it. But it was tremendously effective because we were back in business by the end of that day.
Well, it's never going to be like in the blizzard of '78 where everything.
Well, they said we were only 100 miles offshore. That this last storm, that if it was 100 miles closer, it would have been just like Sandy hitting Boston.
Another bang.
Yeah,
but a lot of the nowadays we're not as we're more in touch with it. People know ahead of time what's happening. Where back in the '70s they didn't. Further back, they didn't know exactly when or how much the weather was going to affect our everyday life. Now it's getting...
Well, but we still have. We had dramatic volatility.
Yeah.
You just mentioned a storm we missed.
Right.
The 100-mile-an-hour wind, the accumulation of snow, the failures in our infrastructure, whether it's in storm drains or bridges or... You can't I won't say you can't, but it's very expensive to plan for the peak exposure of any one of these things. But you can move a little closer to having a workable plan when faced with these things. I had never thought before that it made any sense to have a generator at a suburban office building except to bring the elevator down.
Right.
But it might make more sense to have a generator that's capable of running the building.
Right. Wait, what about how much actual impact does the environment have when you do appraisals and things like that? Especially, I know that they're talking about things in the future, water level rising. Does that have any implication on what you guys? Because I know you guys do a lot of planning for the future.
There's a range of impacts, and they have real stories. The BRA, or Boston Redevelopment Authority, now has new rules on how high the first living floor has to be based on water surges in Boston Harbor. There has always been FEMA. What's FEMA, Brett? Federal Emergency.
Federal Emergency
produce
Management.
flood maps,
Right.
which were recently revised and are forcing homeowners to modify their houses.
Right.
So we always check the FEMA maps for everything that we do in reaction to this wave of fairly dramatic climate conditions. Zoning is being modified, and the federal government through FEMA and their changes is going to be modifying things. We would depend upon the federal benchmarks to say something about it. And
So it does have impact. It just doesn't have a huge impact.
No, we wouldn't ignore it.
Right.
We'd look for it in the pattern. Oh, I had one other. It's not really. It was an anecdote in Florida as a result of the hurricanes and the tornadoes down there. It was almost impossible to get insurance for commercial property, which was virtually unheard of. And lenders will not lend you money if you can't insure your asset. And insurance premiums, they didn't double or triple.
They just wouldn't
They wouldn't give them.
Yeah.
And so you had to self-insure, which meant that you had to guarantee the asset or guarantee the loan, recourse loan, in order to have coverage.
But now, aren't they doing that all along the coast now? I mean, for insurance.
Well, we haven't had an assignment on the coast in the last 12 months, but there is a government program to cover flood-prone properties. And when the revised rates first came out this year, they were, I don't think they were 10 times, but they were probably 4 or 5 times. And in response to public hearings and so forth, there was a rollback recently announced. There's no question the impact is there from a lot of different directions.
And it's funny because one of the big development areas in the city of Boston is the waterfront. So that's where they're building all these tremendous buildings.
Right.
But it has been I mentioned the harbor water surge. That's been involved in, although there's going to be somewhat of a revision in the minimum height in some of the buildings in the seaport. But it is something that the BRA has been focused on for probably 5 or 10 years.
I would think so. I mean, that if anything happened, especially the waterfront is even closer to more open waters than directly in the harbor.
Well, I think it's Greenland is what they're worried about melting away, and if that does, the sea level rises like 17, 20 feet, and that's going to take over all of Boston. That's why they have these revisions to make sure the first level's at least 12 feet.
Before we leave this topic, Sandy certainly surprised Manhattan. I mean, the devastation was just unbelievable. And the subway system got flooded, and I was just on and on and on. And if we had had a Sandy-like storm here in Boston, no one wants to really project what might have occurred, but there are people that have taken a look at where it would have gotten through the walls and what it might have. And there are repercussions, there are restorative, there are remedial action being taken on the waterfront to deal with that kind of a prospect.
Well, I would say they have to assume it's going to happen at some point, since it's been happening year after year. With when we first started with Katrina, it was a major storm. The biggest tornado that ever went across the Midwest happened. Now we have what was supposed to be our biggest storm that was going to hit us in the first. Usually one hits us every 100 years or something, they were saying. And we just missed that one, so each storm just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Yeah.
Well, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we want to know what you see for the future here.
Yeah, we're not the futurists.
Okay.
But our interview is brought to you by New England Restaurant Brokers, recognized leader in the sale of food and liquor businesses for over 30 years. New England restaurant specialists have sold hundreds of food and liquor businesses. If you're looking to buy, sell, or develop a food or liquor business, call New England Restaurant Brokers at 617-721-9655 or go to NEREJRadio.com. Again, that's New England Restaurant Brokers at 617-721-9655 or email NERB@Comcast.net. That's NERB@Comcast.net. We'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
Rick Kaplan is right here on the Money Matters Radio Network.
And we're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio. I'm Rick Kaplan with my co-host Eric Wilson. And the show is brought to you by, actually the interview is brought to you by New England Restaurant Brokers, recognized leader in the sale of food and liquor businesses for over 30 years. New England Restaurant Brokers' team of restaurant specialists have sold hundreds of food and liquor businesses. If you're looking to buy, sell, or develop a food or liquor business, call New England Restaurant Brokers at 617-721-9655 or go to NERestaurantBrokers.com. Again, that's New England Restaurant Brokers at 617-721-9655 or email NERB@Comcast.net. That's NERB@Comcast.net. And we have in the studio, we're talking with David Kirk of Kirk Company, and also Brett Pelletier, who we still haven't heard anything yet.
Just once.
FEMA.
Just once, the FEMA.
But one of the things that we left out in the last segment was nonprofits. You deal with a lot of nonprofit clients.
We do, particularly in housing. The nonprofit sector is, I'd have to say, as sophisticated and as accomplished, and now has the kind of experience in the development of housing, affordable housing more specifically, as much as in the private sector or the so-called for-profit developers. And it's as a result of governmental sponsorship and special programs to encourage nonprofit sponsorship. But it's there. And I don't think 50% of our clients in housing are nonprofits, but a very substantial amount. And some of these people we've worked for or worked with for over 10 years. Nonprofit sponsors.
Nice.
Well, we don't have any of those on the show, fortunately.
Yeah, right.
But one of the things that you're the expert, and we know you have that crystal ball. We want what do you see for the future of the industry?
Well, I would say, I think I mentioned this to you when I first met you about a month ago, that 2000...
I was drinking heavily that night, so I don't recall all of it.
You asked me about 2013, and 2013 was the good beginning of not a robust recovery, but a sound recovery where we had consistent month-to-month gains in most of the economic indicators. And you asked me about 2014 at that time, and I said I think we'll have more of the same. But because it's 12 months later, there's a little more strength, a little more predictability of those positive factors. Whenever I do forecasting, I do it after reading a lot of forecasts. And when I read a forecast, it isn't just their conclusions, but I really do my best to understand the foundation of their conclusions, and also hopefully their track record in the past of how well they do. But forecasts do tend to, if they make it into the media anyway, do tend to do a fairly credible massage of what's available. One of the problems that we've had most recently is the historic relationships that the models for forecasting are based on have changed a great deal. And the models are being refashioned and revised almost as continuously as the data comes out. So we really have a problem with consistency. And you'd have to say the outcome. But enough of that. Now, based on my own look at available data, I've come to the conclusion that the activity of the Fed and the conditions in the capital markets are probably the most important underlying component to be considered during this next period. And I think that we are in 2014, and the Fed is supposed to start ramping up their cost of money in 2015. They're already tapering their bond buying. So we are in the process of change, but a gradual change. And I think it's hard to imagine that 2014 isn't going to continue somewhat the same and that 2015 will be stronger. And then as we get out, well, you can't predict how cycles are going to occur. We're getting towards the end of a 10-year period. And if it isn't 2016, it's probably 2017, when traditionally we have a weakness in the economy because we've built up the supply of, in our case, commercial real estate. And we've built up the production has produced cars and other things that are starting to satisfy the demand to the point where things get unsold and the economy starts to fall somewhat, absorption of the real estate market. When I tried 2016 on a very good friend of mine who's a lot more credible on the nitty-gritty here in the macro, he said 2016's too soon. And that was enough for me to say, okay, 2017. He said that's a little more.
Bump it up a little.
What about people who, the housing market, where they think it's kind of bubbling, is that going to take the same way over to commercial?
I don't know if you're referring to the record production in the greater Boston area of multifamily.
Right. With all the new apartments and residential housing, is that going to affect the housing market?
I think we are going to have a couple of years where the ups and downs of the market on a, if not a day-to-day, month-to-month basis, is going to make people really wonder whether we're overbuilding Boston. But the only reason we're producing this housing now is because of the low-interest environment. You just couldn't make the numbers work. And as hot as the rental market has been in terms of low vacancy and high rent increases, it still wasn't enough to cover the nut on the construction side and borrow money at a reasonable enough rate. So finally it's happened. And so, the stars are in the planets are in the right alignment. I think there are lots of rationale for saying that demand will be there once these units are delivered to absorb those units. Right. If not as promptly as, I don't know if you know Millennium Place downtown in Boston, was sold within a couple of months of when it was completed.
Right.
Now, that was the first project that hit the market. Some of our major rental projects came out in the winter. Right. And the winter is notoriously a bad time to market, and move in and so forth. But over the next month or so, we'll see how quickly the response occurs.
Lenders are going to start lending money.
Oh, we
more
have
freely.
lenders. We have lenders. As a matter of fact, there was one at the reception we went to.
Right.
Well, we always have lenders.
Yeah, they're always around.
Wants to step into the Boston market. There is and will be money available in the Boston market. How long that'll be, I don't know. But we're still in the top three, and we still have a relatively finite market and a restraint on approvals and entitlement. So I think we'll still be attractive. We don't have a lot of speculative construction going on in the commercial sector, and retail is.
Right, you were saying, I was just about to jump on that. You said earlier, the first time we were talking about retail is scrapes. You said that it's not very good. What about office space? Because you were saying that the web has affected retail, and is web affecting office space? And if there's not a lot of people going to office space, there's not a lot of people looking at
in a very different way. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a web impact. It is clear, people have been talking about it for 3 or 4 years, that companies are using less space per employee. And now it has gotten even dramatically. Okay, how many guys? We've got 4 guys around this table. Mm-hmm. This used to be an office for 1 person.
Right.
And not only that, there are 2 or 3 guys that use this when we're not here that are working from home.
Right.
And that has really had an impact on the way office space is being absorbed. We haven't counted it yet. So far, our markets are relatively balanced, and they're increasing rents in most of the submarkets. But that will have an impact. Also have an impact on some of the more, functionally old or depreciated properties. Not all suburban's going to rent again.
Right.
And not all of our old buildings that were always so great are going to rent again because they just aren't appealing.
Well, we're running out of time, David. I appreciate you coming in. And if someone wants to get a hold of you, how would they reach you?
Well, the web is kirkco.com, KIRKCO.com. And my number is 617-261-7100. And we look forward to, and I appear regularly in the New England Real Estate Journal.
Right.
Yes,
David always is writing a great
author.
article. If someone picks up the paper, they can always see David in there.
And that is in the finance section, correct?
That is correct.
Yes. And like I said,
I'm an avid reader. Rick, not so much. He's an average watcher. If you're on TV, like he'll watch this show about 100 times.
I get the audio version of the
of course.
New England Real Estate Journal.
When he drives, someone's reading it to him.
Let me thank you. It's really been a pleasure to join you guys and have an opportunity to talk about these.
Well,
it was
appreciate
exciting.
you coming in, and we appreciate all the comments you had, Brett.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks for the coaching.
Yeah, way to be back there.
And
what?
No,
I was just going to say. No, I just want to say, yeah. So fantastic interview. We really appreciate the time.
Well, our interview with David was brought to you by NEBFM 2014. Do you sell to facility managers, building owners, or property managers? See thousands of these decision makers at the Northeast Buildings and Facilities Management Show, June 18th and 19th at the Boston Convention Center. Go to proexpos.com. That's proexpos.com. And we'll be right back on Money Matters Radio Network.
It's New England Real Estate Journal Radio on the Money Matters Radio Network and online at moneymattersboston.com.
And we're back on New England Real Estate Journal Radio, and I'm Rick Kaplan with my co-host Eric Wilson. We're coming to a close of another great show, and our show has been most of the show has been brought to you by NEBFM 2014. Do you sell to facilities managers or building owners? See thousands of these decision makers at the Northeast Buildings and Facilities Show this June at the Boston Convention Center. Go to proexpos.com. And Eric, we have some events that we are
coming up. Yep, we have the
Saturday. There's
the Service Master by Gilmore is putting on a charity event for Roseanne Sidori of National Development. That's going to be a really good time over in Norwood. I can't wait to get my dancing shoes on about 9 p.m. Meet me in the center, ladies. No, I'm just kidding.
At the Help Conference.
Help Conference,
At
7th and the 8th?
The Seaport Waterfront Hotel.
Right.
And this is a great conference that anyone that's in the
And we'll be doing our show from there, right?
And we're going to be doing
A
our
podcast, anyway, from there.
Exactly.
Right.
From
We'll be doing
the,
a podcast.
Seaport during the show, which is always a great show.
It is. Shout out to Jim O'Connell, great guy.
Yeah. So if you have nothing to do on April
If you have
8th,
nothing to do,
if you have
listen,
nothing
there's
to
nothing
do,
better to do than come visit us 7th and 8th at the Help Conference at the Seaport World
or
Hotel.
if you want something that's more productive to do,
Right.
come down.
Come hang with us.
That's right,
Free
yeah.
coffee on Rick.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll buy you breakfast over there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It is complimentary. Remember they had those?
That's right.
They had the ridiculous egg and cheese
We did on those
croissants.
croissants.
Yeah, remember that?
And that's why we keep going.
Yes, right. And that's how we
That
remember.
sounds good to me.
Oh,
It was.
so
It was
good.
really good.
They had
You might wanna come
ridiculous.
down
They
to the
had
whole
ham,
conference.
cheese, and
For
egg roll
breakfast.
croissants on one huge plate of them, and then a huge one of sausage, egg, and cheese croissants. It was amazing. And we're going back to there.
So, next Thursday, Iram has the.
No, it's this. It was the Thursday. This show's going to come out after
No.
the. We're going Thursday.
No, this show's coming out Saturday, Eric.
Yes, and we're going April 3rd. So this Saturday is going to be April 5th.
Oh wait, yes,
Yes.
that's right.
So we'll have already visited the
That's right.
Massachusetts
I'm all
State
screwed
Tour.
up
So
with
you
dates.
are.
You're right.
Well, they've already visited the state. Well, so we'll tell you next week about what the state tour was like.
Yeah,
but it's going to be a lot of fun.
At Cheers.
At Cheers, we're going to meet Senator. I want to say this is how involved in politics I am. I believe his name is Bill Wind. No, do you know who our senator is? No, you don't.
Which senator?
Oh, there's more than one. Tell us, go. No, I'm sure there's two of them. But isn't there a woman and a male and female?
Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth
Yeah, it's one.
Warren.
And the other one is the male, who is Bill something, right? No,
Bill?
Mark.
Yeah,
Ed Markey.
Ed Markey. Okay, so maybe him. Yeah,
Yeah,
I told you,
Bill.
I don't involve myself in politics
Yeah.
just because I don't like.
Thanks,
I like to
Brett.
sit on
Yeah.
the fence. Thank you, Brett. Hey,
Hey, that
we
was
got
Brett
Brett to
Bell,
talk.
yeah.
Brett's the guy who knows the politics. I got it. I'll lose that next time. But we also have June 11th. We're going to do a. For those who came to the Cocktails and Conversations in Boston on January 30th and saw that we brought all the associations together of Massachusetts, some obviously of New England like SIOR or CCIM. We're doing the same thing, but this time in New Hampshire. We're going to do
It's going to be at the Sheridan in Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
It's
New
gonna be-
Hampshire.
yeah.
It's going to be.
another big event,
another
and this
big
time
event.
we're going to meet New Hampshire's association. So you're definitely going to want to look forward to catching that invite from Rick.
And April 15th, don't miss our new show, which is coming out on the UR Business Network
Yep.
for the New York Real Estate Journal radio show.
Yeah,
And we're going to be, first guest is going to be
Dono.
North Hartford, Connecticut, Dono.
Yeah,
Their
talk about their
project.
investment project
That's,
and slap it out into Manhattan where all those investors are.
that's right.
Right.
So we're looking for that. And there'll be 2 shows every month.
Every time I say "yup," I always think of Step Brothers, and when Will Ferrell asks them, "Do you want to do karate?"
Yup.
And I feel like I do the same thing here on the radio show.
I want to thank David Kirk and Kirk Company for coming in, and Brett Pelletier. I also want to thank our sponsors, the NEBFM 2014, Command Security Corporation, the New England Real Estate Journal, as always, and also the New England Restaurant Brokers. And I think this deal is done.